my fraction video, I decided to use Legos. And for the beginning, children usually start using halves and wholes. So I want to introduce halves and wholes by using Legos. Here we have quarters, we have halves, and we have wholes. So first I would introduce the quarters, and we would build halves by using quarters. So we'd put two halves, two quarters together, two quarters together to make a half. And this is a half. And then I would illustrate the half. And it took two quarters to make the half. And then I would illustrate, in order to get a whole, you would take two halves, make a whole. And this is a whole. I put the whole next to the halves. Two halves, make a whole. When my students further develop their concept of fractions, I can also introduce adding and subtracting. So let's say I have two halves. I take one half away. It leaves a half. But the two halves are a whole. So if I take one half away, is it still a whole? It's not a whole any longer. Now it's only a half. I can also add. So let's say I have two halves and I want to add a quarter. Two halves make a whole, plus 1/4 would be 1 1/2. Let's say I have two halves, so I have a whole plus one whole makes two wholes. Or I could do 1/2 plus 1/2 makes a whole. And when my students develop their concept of adding and subtracting, we can also go on further into dividing and multiplying fractions. And this has been my introduction of halves and wholes and adding and subtracting fractions using Legos. You can introduce this to first graders, second graders, even kindergartners.